A man and his girlfriend walked into the restaurant, and immediately the attention of the staff was drawn to them. It was one of those places where everything was polished and expensive, from the silverware on the tables to the soft glow of the lights. The kind of restaurant where people came not just to eat, but to see and be seen. The couple carried themselves with confidence, their clothes and the way they spoke signaling a life that most people could only imagine. The young waitress noticed them right away. She had been working in the restaurant for a little over a year, and she had seen all kinds of customers. Some were kind and polite, some rushed and impatient, and some didn't think twice before making others feel small. She had learned to handle them all, but there was always a part of her that hoped for the simple courtesy of respect as she approached their table. The girlfriend made it very clear she had expectations. Her tone was sharp, even before she spoke. She glanced around the restaurant, as if testing whether everyone was watching her and whether her place in the social hierarchy was obvious. When the waitress greeted them with a warm, friendly smile and a polite introduction, the girlfriend barely acknowledged it. "Make sure the wine is chilled. Not too cold, not too warm," the girlfriend said, tapping her fingers on the table. "And I hope you know the menu well. I don't like having to repeat myself." Her words weren't loud enough to upset the whole room, but they were sharp enough for the waitress to feel the weight of them. The waitress nodded politely, hiding the slight sting that came with the insult. She had learned over time that professionalism meant keeping calm, even when someone spoke to her as if she were invisible. She returned to the bar to double-check the wine selection, making sure everything was exactly right. When she brought the first course, a small misstep happened. It wasn't a huge mistake, just the kind that happens in a busy restaurant. Perhaps she placed the salad a little to the left, or the dressing was not poured with perfect symmetry. In that moment, the girlfriend's expression changed. A smile turned into a frown, and the words came before she could stop them. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to notice. "Are you serious? I asked for it a certain way. Can anyone here actually do their job properly?" Her tone was sharp, and she looked directly at the waitress, her eyes scanning her face for an apology. The young waitress felt her heart sink, but she didn't let it show. She took a deep breath and apologized in a calm, steady voice. "I'm very sorry. I'll fix it right away." She made the adjustment quickly and returned to the table with the salad exactly as requested. She offered a polite smile, though inside she felt embarrassed and tensed. Other diners couldn't help but notice the scene. There was an uncomfortable silence as everyone wondered how this would unfold. Some whispered to their companions, while others just stared at the interaction. The girlfriend, however, didn't care about anyone else. Her focus was entirely on the waitress and the way she could make her feel small. The man at the table, her boyfriend, remained quiet. He sipped his drink and watched. There was a part of him that felt uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything yet. He could see the waitress trying to maintain her composure, and he could also see how his girlfriend seemed to thrive on having someone beneath her. Even if it was just for a moment, the waitress returned to the kitchen after adjusting the salad. Behind the counter, she took a moment to steady herself. She wiped her hands, leaned against the counter for a second, and took a deep breath. She reminded herself that this was just part of the job, that not everyone would behave this way, and that her worth wasn't measured by one person's cruelty. When she came back to the table, the girlfriend immediately pointed out another detail, something minor. Perhaps the cutlery wasn't perfectly aligned, or the bread basket was missing a small item. She made her comment loudly, clearly expecting the waitress to respond with nervousness or fear. Instead, the waitress smiled politely again, answering with a calm voice, "I'll take care of that right away." It wasn't just patience that the waitress carried. It was dignity. She didn't let the insult break her. She knew that reacting with anger or tears would only feed the girlfriend's sense of power. So she focused on doing her job, silently hoping the dinner would pass without further conflict. The girlfriend, however, wasn't finished. She made several more small comments, each one designed to belittle. She sighed loudly when the waiter brought the wine, tapped her fingers impatiently when the service didn't move at her exact speed, and even rolled her eyes at small mistakes that could have been ignored. Each action was intentional. She wanted the waitress to feel small, to know that she was in control. The man at the table noticed the waitress's composure and began to see a different side of her girlfriend. He had been with her for a while and had always admired her ambition and confidence. But now, watching her behave this way toward someone who was just doing her job, he felt a strange discomfort. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a growing realization that kindness mattered more than wealth or status. Other staff members noticed too. The kitchen team whispered quietly among themselves, and even the manager came over to check what was happening. The young waitress handled it with professionalism, explaining politely that she would correct any issue and that she appreciated the customer's feedback. But the girlfriend barely acknowledged the effort. She acted as if the world revolved around her, demanding attention and respect without offering any in return. Despite the tension, there was something about the waitress that stood out. She didn't cry, yell, or argue. She didn't make excuses or complain. She simply did her job. Her calmness in the face of such rudeness made some of the other diners sit up and take notice. They admired her strength, even silently, and it made the girlfriend's behavior seem even more inappropriate. The girlfriend eventually leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, clearly frustrated that the waitress was not reacting as expected. She whispered to the man beside her, complaining quietly but sharply about the service. The man listened, still uneasy, as he realized he had never really seen this side of her before. He could feel the energy in the room shift, from the tension of the insult to a growing respect for the waitress's dignity. As the dinner continued, the waitress moved between tables with grace, attending to other customers with a cheerful smile that didn't fade despite the unpleasantness she faced. She had learned that people like the girlfriend existed, and the best way to handle them was to remain calm, professional, and polite. She had trained herself to see beyond the insult, to focus on the work she loved, and to remember that her value was not measured by someone else's cruelty. Meanwhile, the girlfriend seemed to grow more irritated as the waitress remained composed. Every little mistake she noticed was amplified in her mind, but every attempt to shame the waitress was met with quiet professionalism instead of panic or embarrassment. The contrast was striking. Where the girlfriend expected submission, she found dignity. Where she expected fear, she found patience. The man observed silently, realizing that this evening was teaching him a lesson he hadn't anticipated. He had thought wealth, style, and charm were signs of greatness. But watching the waitress, he could see a deeper quality: strength, humility, and grace. The kind of qualities that could not be bought or demanded. The contrast between the girlfriend's arrogance and the waitress's quiet confidence was impossible to ignore. By the time dessert arrived, the girlfriend was noticeably frustrated. She made one last critical comment, but it barely shook the waitress. The young woman handled the situation with the same professionalism as she had from the start, placing the dessert neatly on the table and offering a polite smile. For a brief moment, the restaurant felt calm again, the tension easing as the waitress continued her work with dignity. The man finally spoke, though quietly. He said something simple, a remark that reflected his observation of the evening so far. The girlfriend barely acknowledged it, too focused on herself and the way things were not exactly as she wished. The waitress, on the other hand, continued her work without complaint. A quiet reminder that sometimes character and patience speak louder than wealth or words. As the couple left, the staff breathed a little easier. The young waitress had endured a challenging situation, yet she had emerged without losing her composure or dignity. It had been a tense evening, but it had also shown something important, that strength is quiet, patience is powerful, and respect is earned through actions, not money or status. And while the girlfriend had left the restaurant feeling frustrated and angry, the man walked out with a growing sense of awareness. He had seen something that money could never buy, real grace under pressure, something that left him questioning not just the behavior of his girlfriend, but the meaning of true character itself. The evening continued, but the tension from the earlier incident lingered like a shadow over the restaurant. The young waitress moved quietly between tables, refilling glasses, checking plates, and ensuring that each customer felt attended to. Even though she had just been insulted, she didn't let it show. She knew that every action mattered, not just for the customer in front of her, but for herself, for her sense of pride and professionalism. In the corner, the couple's table drew subtle attention. The girlfriend was clearly upset, slouched slightly in her chair, muttering under her breath about the service. She tapped her fingers impatiently on the polished table, glancing around as if expecting someone to come and apologize on her behalf. The man beside her watched quietly, his expression calm, though his mind was busy. He couldn't shake the image of the waitress standing there, composed, unfazed by the insults. There was a quiet strength in her posture, in the way she held herself, that seemed to speak volumes without a single word. The waitress, meanwhile, returned to the kitchen briefly, carrying a tray with orders for another table. She leaned against the counter for just a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She didn't want to let anyone see her frustration. She reminded herself that she was more than the words of a stranger, more than someone's insult, more than the brief judgment of a person who had no idea about her life. Her thoughts wandered for a second to why she was working this job. It wasn't just about earning a paycheck. It was about responsibility. She supported her younger siblings, helped pay for her mother's medical bills, and contributed to her community. Every shift she worked was part of a bigger picture, a story of perseverance and determination. No one in that restaurant knew the weight she carried, or the effort it took to be here each day, smiling, despite life's challenges. When she returned to the couple's table, she moved carefully, placing the dessert plates exactly where they belonged. The girlfriend immediately pointed out something small, a minor flaw in presentation. "Why is this not straight?" she said, her voice sharp, as if expecting the waitress to crumble under the comment. The waitress simply smiled politely, adjusted the plate slightly, and said, "Thank you for pointing that out. I've corrected it." Her tone was calm, patient, and professional. The man observed quietly. He had seen plenty of rude customers in his own life, but watching his girlfriend behave this way toward someone trying to do her job made him uneasy. He noticed the subtle respect in how other diners glanced at the interaction. Some were sympathetic toward the waitress, impressed by her composure. Others looked at the girlfriend, noticing the unnecessary harshness in her words. The contrast between the two women was striking, one exuding quiet confidence, the other demanding attention through arrogance and impatience. The waitress returned to the kitchen to refill drinks for other tables, but the brief respite gave her a moment to think. She knew that patience was her strength, that her ability to stay calm in difficult situations set her apart. She had learned over time that losing her temper, reacting angrily, or showing embarrassment rarely helped. What mattered was how she carried herself, how she treated others, and how she handled the challenges thrown her way. As she moved through the restaurant, she noticed the way some colleagues watched her. A fellow waiter nodded subtly in her direction, a silent acknowledgement of how gracefully she handled the previous encounter. The kitchen staff whispered among themselves, admiring her patience and professionalism. These small gestures, unnoticed by most customers, reminded her that respect wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, invisible to those who didn't look closely. Meanwhile, the girlfriend's frustration grew. She began complaining under her breath, making small jabs at the service and the food. She expected immediate attention, a show of obedience, and a sense of guilt from the waitress. But none of that came. The waitress moved with the same calm, steady steps, continuing her work without letting the anger or criticism affect her demeanor. The man could feel the tension building. He realized that he had always admired his girlfriend's confidence and determination, but tonight he was seeing a side of her he hadn't noticed before. He had always thought strength came from power and control, from commanding attention and getting what you wanted. But watching the waitress handle the situation with quiet dignity made him reconsider. True strength wasn't loud or flashy. It wasn't about belittling others to feel superior. It was about remaining calm, composed, and respectful, even in the face of unfair treatment. At one point, the girlfriend's eyes darted around the restaurant, as if searching for allies who might side with her. She lowered her voice to mutter complaints, assuming that someone else would understand her frustration. The waitress, however, continued her work with precision, serving other tables with a friendly smile. She didn't need anyone to defend her. She had her own confidence, her own sense of worth. The man watched as the girlfriend grew increasingly agitated. Each comment she made, each sigh or tap of her fingers, seemed to highlight the contrast even more. Where she expected the waitress to show fear, frustration, or embarrassment, she found patience. Where she expected submission, she found quiet dignity. The difference was so clear that the man couldn't ignore it. It left him feeling conflicted, questioning not just his girlfriend's behavior, but also his own understanding of what mattered in a person. Other diners began to notice as well. Some whispered quietly, impressed by the way the waitress managed to stay calm despite the verbal attacks. Others looked on silently, feeling awkward for the way the girlfriend was behaving. The energy in the room had shifted subtly. The tension from the insult lingered, but it was balanced by the respect and admiration people felt toward the waitress. Back in the kitchen, the waitress wiped her hands and leaned against the counter for a moment. She reminded herself why she was here, why she chose to keep working, why she didn't let insults define her. Every small challenge was an opportunity to prove to herself that she was stronger than any words, stronger than any temporary humiliation. She was not defined by the judgments of others, only by her own actions. Returning to the table, she carefully placed water glasses, ensured napkins were aligned, and adjusted utensils as needed. The girlfriend immediately found something to criticize, but the waitress handled it with the same calm tone, acknowledging the issue politely and correcting it efficiently. No hint of resentment appeared in her voice, only professionalism. The man noticed something else, too, a subtle shift in how the waitress interacted with the world around her. She didn't just serve food. She made people feel seen, respected, and cared for. Her focus wasn't on wealth, status, or appearances. It was on doing her job well, on treating others with dignity, and on carrying herself with confidence. It was the kind of strength that couldn't be measured by money or social standing. The girlfriend, growing frustrated, leaned back in her chair and muttered complaints under her breath. The man remained silent but thoughtful. He realized that this evening was teaching him something important about character, patience, and respect. He had been with someone who valued appearance and power. But what he was seeing now made him wonder if those qualities were really as important as he had believed. The waitress continued her work, moving from table to table with the same grace. She smiled politely at customers, refilled drinks, and checked on orders with precision. Each action, small as it seemed, carried meaning. She was not only doing her job, she was showing that patience, dignity, and professionalism were far more powerful than arrogance or entitlement. As the dinner progressed, The girlfriend's annoyance became more obvious. She whispered complaints about the service, made small gestures of frustration, and even cast subtle glares at the waitress. But each time, the waitress responded calmly, with a smile and a simple acknowledgement. She never argued, never raised her voice, and never allowed the insult to break her. The man felt a growing sense of admiration for the waitress. He had been observing closely, noting the quiet way she commanded respect. It was not through wealth, status, or power, but through her actions, her composure, and her dignity. She had turned what could have been a humiliating situation into a demonstration of true strength. Other diners continued to notice as well. Some whispered quietly about how impressive her patience was. Others simply watched silently, recognizing that the energy in the room had shifted. The girlfriend's insults no longer had the impact she intended. Instead, they highlighted her own impatience and lack of empathy. By the time the evening was nearing its end, the atmosphere had changed. The initial tension caused by the girlfriend's behavior was still present, but it was now balanced by a sense of respect for the waitress. She had endured a difficult situation without losing her composure or her dignity. Her strength was quiet, but it was undeniable. As the couple prepared to leave, the man reflected on the evening. He realized that he had seen a different kind of power, one that didn't rely on money or social status. He had seen patience, dignity, and professionalism in action. He had witnessed someone respond to rudeness, not with anger or humiliation, but with calm and strength. The girlfriend, on the other hand, left feeling frustrated and irritated. She had expected submission, fear, or embarrassment from the waitress, but found none. Instead, she left quietly, unaware that she had revealed more about herself than anyone else. The waitress watched them leave, her posture calm, her expression composed. She knew that life would continue with its challenges, that not everyone would behave kindly, and that patience and dignity would always be her strongest allies. She returned to her work with the same focus, ready to serve the needy customer with the same grace and professionalism that had carried her through this evening. The man lingered for a moment longer, taking in the scene. He realized that the waitress had taught him something valuable about human character, respect, and true strength. He had seen firsthand that wealth and status did not define a person's worth. What mattered most was how someone treated others, and how they carried themselves when faced with challenges. The evening slowly moved toward its later hours, and the restaurant had started to empty out. The young waitress took a brief moment behind the counter to rest her hands and straighten her apron. Even though she had been through the tension at the couple's table, she felt a sense of quiet pride. She had handled a difficult situation without losing her composure, and it reminded her why she worked so hard every day. She thought about her life outside of the restaurant. Many people assumed that waitressing was just a job, something temporary or something simple. But for her, it was much more than that. She worked here to support her family. Her younger siblings depended on her, and her parents had sacrificed so much to keep the household together. Every shift she worked was a step toward ensuring that they had what they needed: school fees paid on time, food on the table, bills taken care of. She thought about how proud she would feel when her siblings achieved their goals, knowing she had helped them get there. There was also a part of her that had dreams for herself. She wasn't just working to survive. She was working to build a better life. She took classes in the evenings, studying something she was passionate about. She wanted to improve her skills, to grow her opportunities, and to eventually move into a career where she could make a difference for more people. The restaurant was a stepping stone, but it was also a place where she learned resilience, patience, and self-respect, lessons that no classroom could teach. Back in the dining area, the couple had left, leaving behind a faint tension that lingered in the air. The manager approached the young waitress quietly, giving her a small nod of approval. He had observed the entire scene and knew that she had handled it with professionalism that went beyond the ordinary. It wasn't just her ability to serve food properly. It was her ability to manage emotions, to stay calm under pressure, and to maintain dignity in the face of unnecessary cruelty. "Don't let them get to you," the manager whispered as he handed her a fresh tray. "You did everything perfectly. That's all that matters." She smiled softly and nodded, grateful for the small encouragement. It was true that the job was often demanding, and people didn't always notice the effort behind every task. But moments like this reminded her that her strength didn't go unseen. Not by everyone, at least. Later, she returned to the couple's table to clear the dishes they had left behind. She noticed that the girlfriend's chair had been left slightly askew, and there were traces of crumbs and spilled water. She cleaned everything carefully, ensuring the table looked exactly as it should. Even though the people who had been rude were gone, she treated the table with the same care and attention as she would any other customer. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about maintaining her own standards, about showing that she didn't allow others' behavior to change who she was as she worked. She overheard fragments of conversations at nearby tables. Some customers spoke quietly about the earlier incident. "Did you see how calm she stayed?" One whispered, "I don't know how she managed to handle that. I would have lost my temper for sure." Another nodded, adding, "It takes real strength to stay polite and professional when someone is so rude. That girl is impressive." She smiled inwardly. She didn't need their praise, but it was comforting to know that her efforts were noticed. She had always believed that true character was revealed in moments like this, not when everyone was watching, but when someone treated you poorly and you chose to respond with dignity. The man, meanwhile, had lingered near the entrance, waiting for a moment to speak to the waitress. He had watched the entire interaction from the beginning, feeling a growing sense of respect for her. He wanted to understand more about her, to know who she was beyond the apron and polite smile. As the restaurant quieted down, he finally approached her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I just wanted to say, you handled that situation incredibly well. I don't think I've ever seen someone stay so calm and professional under pressure." The waitress looked at him, surprised but appreciative. She nodded politely. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I tried to do my best no matter what." He studied her for a moment, noticing the quiet confidence in her eyes. "It's more than that," he said. "There's something about the way you carry yourself. It's not just skill, it's character. You have a strength most people don't." She hesitated, feeling a little self-conscious, but also proud. "I've had to learn it," she said softly. "Life doesn't always make it easy, but you find ways to keep going." He smiled, clearly impressed. "I can tell. I can't imagine someone being able to handle what just happened with the same calm. You're remarkable." The conversation was brief, but it left a lasting impression. She returned to her work, but a small sense of recognition lingered. It wasn't just about surviving difficult customers. It was about proving to herself, quietly, that she could handle challenges with dignity and strength. Later, as she moved back to the kitchen to finish her shift, she reflected on her life and the choices that had brought her here. She thought about the sacrifices her family had made, the nights she had stayed up studying after a long shift, and the way she had learned to face challenges head-on. Each of these experiences had shaped her into someone who didn't need to react with anger or frustration to unfair treatment. Instead, she relied on patience, skill, and integrity. The restaurant's manager called her over briefly. "You know," he said quietly, "not everyone would have managed that table the way you did. Most people would have let it get to them. But you handled it perfectly. You didn't just serve food. You showed strength. That's rare." She smiled, feeling a quiet pride. "I just try to do what's right," she said, back on the floor. She noticed that the restaurant was quieter now, most of the customers having left. A sense of calm had returned. She moved between tables, finishing tasks, cleaning up small spills, and straightening chairs. Even in these quiet moments, she reminded herself that her work mattered not for the praise, not for recognition, but because it was a reflection of who she was. Her thoughts drifted again to her life outside the restaurant. She had dreams she wanted to pursue, skills she wanted to improve, and opportunities she was slowly working toward. The lessons she learned here, patience, resilience, and dignity, would serve her well in any path she chose. She was determined not to let one rude customer, or even one difficult situation, define her or shake her confidence. Meanwhile, the man who had observed her earlier sat quietly at a nearby table, reflecting on what he had seen. He realized that wealth, status, and appearance were not measures of character. He had witnessed someone handle unfair treatment with grace, proving that true strength was shown in actions, not in money or social standing. The contrast between the girlfriend's behavior and the waitress's composure was striking, and it left him thinking about what truly mattered in people. The waitress moved to a side station to refill supplies. As she worked, she overheard the staff talking quietly. They spoke about how she had handled the couple, how she had remained calm, polite, and professional throughout the ordeal. Even the kitchen staff nodded in approval, recognizing the skill it took to manage such a tense situation without losing composure. It was moments like these that reminded her why she continued to work hard, why she valued patience and professionalism, and why she never allowed herself to be defined by someone else's rude behavior. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, that difficult people would appear, and that circumstances would sometimes feel unfair. But she also knew that the way she responded would define her far more than the challenges themselves. Later, as she finished her shift and prepared to leave, she took one last look around the restaurant. The evening had been long and challenging, but it had also been a reminder of her own strength. She had endured humiliation without losing dignity, faced unfair criticism with patience, and maintained professionalism when others might have faltered. It was a quiet triumph, one that no one might fully understand, but it mattered deeply to her. As she stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against her face. She felt a sense of relief, but also a quiet pride. The events of the evening had tested her in ways that went beyond serving food. They had tested her character, her patience, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. She had passed that test, and she knew that the lessons would stay with her for the rest of her life. The man left shortly after, still reflecting on what he had seen. He realized that his admiration for the waitress had grown, that her quiet strength had made him question what truly mattered in life. He had come to the restaurant expecting a normal evening, but he had left with a new understanding of dignity, character, and true resilience. Even the girlfriend, walking away from the restaurant, carried a sense of frustration. She had expected to dominate the situation, to assert power through insults and impatience. But she had encountered someone who refused to be intimidated. The evening had revealed more about her own behavior than she might have realized, though she may not have fully understood it yet. The young waitress, meanwhile, walked home slowly, thinking about the future. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, that unfairness and rudeness were inevitable, but she also knew that she had the inner strength to face them. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and she had proven, once again, that dignity and patience were powerful tools that no one could take away. As she reached her small apartment, she paused for a moment, thinking about the lessons of the evening. It wasn't just about surviving a rude customer or maintaining professionalism. It was about understanding her own strength, valuing herself, and knowing that true character is revealed not when everything goes perfectly, but when life tests you the most. The next evening, the restaurant was busy again, but the atmosphere felt different. Staff members moved efficiently, and the sound of quiet chatter and clinking dishes filled the room. Among the diners, there was a new energy. The story of the previous night's incident had spread quietly among the staff, and a few regular customers whispered about the young waitress's calm handling of the wealthy couple. The waitress moved through the restaurant with her usual precision, greeting each table with a smile and checking on orders. But she could sense that something was about to happen. There was an unusual tension in the air, subtle but noticeable, like the calm before a storm. She didn't know what to expect, but her instincts told her to stay alert. Earlier that day, the manager had asked her to come into the office briefly. "I want to let you know something before tonight," he had said quietly, handing her a cup of tea. "You handled yourself exceptionally well yesterday. But there's more you should know about the people who came in." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" The manager leaned back, careful with his words. "The couple? The woman who was rude last night, she has a reputation. She's connected to some very influential people, and she doesn't usually respond well when someone proves her assumptions wrong." The waitress listened quietly, her mind racing. She had already guessed that the man and woman had money, but she hadn't considered how deep their influence might run. She had always treated customers equally, regardless of wealth or status, and this moment reminded her why she needed to remain calm and professional. Back on the floor, the evening began like any other. Customers filled the tables, the chefs worked diligently in the kitchen, and the staff moved with practiced coordination. The waitress felt a sense of focus, her mind on her work, but she couldn't ignore the curiosity building inside her. Something told her that the night might bring more than just ordinary service. It wasn't long before the couple returned. The man seemed quieter this time, and the girlfriend, though still dressed sharply and moving with confidence, appeared tense. She scanned the room as she entered, her eyes settling briefly on the young waitress. There was a flicker of recognition in her expression, but it was quickly replaced by annoyance. She hadn't forgotten the way the waitress had handled her the night before. As they sat, the waitress approached the table with her usual smile. She greeted them politely and asked if they were ready to order. The girlfriend's tone was sharp but controlled this time. "I expect everything to be perfect tonight," she said. "Do you understand?" The waitress nodded calmly. "Of course. I'll make sure everything is exactly as you want it." The evening began smoothly, but the tension was palpable. The waitress moved between tables efficiently, keeping a watchful eye on the couple's table while attending to other diners. Every small detail mattered. Drinks were refilled promptly, plates were served carefully, and utensils were aligned precisely. The girlfriend seemed to notice every little thing, scrutinizing the service, but the waitress remained composed. She didn't react to the whispered complaints or subtle sighs. She treated each interaction with care, focusing on the job at hand and maintaining her own dignity. Halfway through the dinner, something unexpected happened. The restaurant owner, a distinguished woman who rarely appeared in the dining area, approached the table. She carried herself with quiet authority, and when she spoke, her voice was firm but polite. "Good evening," the owner said, addressing the couple. "I hope everything has been satisfactory so far." The girlfriend's expression changed slightly, a mix of surprise and discomfort. She nodded politely, but her eyes flickered to the waitress, who continued serving with calm efficiency. The owner's gaze briefly met the waitress's, and there was a subtle acknowledgement, a shared understanding that went beyond words. "Everything is fine," the girlfriend replied. Though her tone lacked the confidence she usually carried, the owner's eyes softened as she spoke again, this time addressing the waitress directly. "Thank you for your excellent service," she said. "It hasn't gone unnoticed." The young waitress felt a small wave of relief, but she remained composed. She continued her work, carefully placing dishes, refilling drinks, and checking on other tables. The recognition from the owner was meaningful, but it didn't change her approach. She still focused on professionalism, patience, and dignity. Then, the moment came that would change everything. The owner leaned slightly closer to the table, speaking just loud enough for the couple to hear. "You should know," she said, her tone calm but deliberate, "that the young woman serving you isn't just a waitress. She is closely connected to this restaurant in a way you might not expect." The girlfriend's eyes widened slightly, and the man looked puzzled. The young waitress continued to serve, maintaining her composure, but her heart began to race. She had a feeling the moment of revelation was near. The owner continued, her voice steady. "She has been instrumental in many aspects of this business, beyond just serving customers. She has worked behind the scenes on management decisions, community initiatives, and staff training. Her dedication and intelligence have been crucial to our success." The girlfriend's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. She leaned slightly forward, as if trying to understand what she had just heard. Her previous arrogance and judgment seemed to falter under the weight of the revelation. The man remained quiet, absorbing the information, while the young waitress finally looked at the couple directly. She maintained her calm smile, but there was a subtle sense of quiet pride in her eyes. For the first time, the balance of power in the room felt different. She was no longer just someone to be criticized or underestimated. The owner's words continued, gently but firmly. "It's important to recognize that appearances can be deceiving. People are often more capable, strong, and knowledgeable than they might seem at first glance. Respect and understanding should be given to everyone, regardless of their role or status." The girlfriend's face flushed slightly, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. She had expected to dominate the situation again, but instead, she faced the reality that she had misjudged someone. The young waitress, who had shown patience and professionalism, was not only competent, but essential to the very operation of the restaurant. The man finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I think we both underestimated her," he said. "I see now that her strength and ability go far beyond what we witnessed last night. I hope you can recognize that as well." The girlfriend looked away briefly, clearly uncomfortable. She muttered something under her breath, but the words were quiet, almost lost in the background of the restaurant. Her previous sense of superiority had been challenged, and she was unsure how to respond. The young waitress returned to the couple's table, placing a carefully prepared dessert in front of them. Her composure remained intact, but there was a quiet sense of satisfaction in the way she handled the moment. She had not acted out of anger or revenge. She had simply done her job, maintained her dignity, and allowed her true abilities to speak for themselves. The owner added one final remark, directed at the entire restaurant. "Let this be a reminder that character, patience, and integrity are far more powerful than wealth or status. Everyone in this room, from staff to customers, has something valuable to offer." The couple left the restaurant shortly afterward. The man seemed thoughtful, his admiration for the young waitress evident in his expression. The girlfriend, however, left in silence, her pride shaken by the unexpected revelation. She had assumed that her social standing and wealth would give her power in every interaction. But she had been confronted with the reality that true influence comes from respect, knowledge, and character. After they left, the staff breathed a collective sigh of relief. The young waitress returned to the kitchen, where her colleagues congratulated her quietly. They had watched the evening unfold and were impressed not only by her skill, but also by the way she had remained calm and professional under intense pressure. The manager approached her again, smiling. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "Not just last night, but tonight as well." You've shown everyone what real strength looks like." She nodded, feeling a sense of quiet pride. "I just tried to do my best," she said. "That's all anyone can do." As the restaurant closed for the night, the young waitress walked home slowly, reflecting on the events of the past 2 evenings. She had faced arrogance, judgment, and unfair criticism, yet she had emerged with her dignity intact. She had shown that true character is revealed not by wealth or status, but by how someone treats others and how they carry themselves under pressure. The lessons of the evening stayed with her. Patience, professionalism, and respect are powerful tools. True strength is quiet, and it often goes unnoticed by those who focus only on appearances. But those who recognize it understand its value, and those who underestimate it often learn the hard way. For the first time, the young waitress felt a profound sense of acknowledgement. She had not sought recognition or revenge, but by simply being herself and handling challenges with integrity, she had earned the respect of those who mattered most. As she entered her apartment, she paused at the door and took a deep breath. The night had been a reminder of everything she had worked for: her family, her future, and her own sense of self-worth. She had faced adversity and emerged stronger, proving that patience and dignity are far more powerful than arrogance and entitlement. The next morning, the restaurant was quiet, bathed in the soft light that filtered through the large windows. The young waitress arrived early, as she always did, ready to begin her shift. The events of the previous 2 nights still lingered in her mind. She thought about the couple who had come in, the insults, and the shocking realization the girlfriend had faced. Even now, she felt a mixture of pride and reflection. Understanding how much she had grown through the experience, she started by organizing her station, stacking plates neatly, refilling condiments, and checking orders. She moved with her usual efficiency, but there was a lightness to her step that hadn't been there before. Not because she had proved herself to anyone, but because she had proven to herself that patience, dignity, and calm could carry her through even the most uncomfortable situations. That her coworkers noticed it immediately. The kitchen staff nodded at her as she passed by, a subtle acknowledgement of her quiet strength. One of the servers whispered, "You handled that situation like a pro." "I don't think I've ever seen anyone stay so composed." She smiled softly, but didn't let it change her focus. She knew that respect and acknowledgement were gratifying, but they weren't why she worked hard every day. The restaurant manager approached her again, this time with a cup of coffee in hand. "I just want to say," he said gently, "that you've made an impression, not just on the staff, but on people who walked in thinking they could intimidate. You've shown everyone what real strength looks like." She nodded, accepting the compliment quietly. "I just try to do my best," she said. "That's all anyone can do." As the morning went on, the restaurant gradually filled with customers. Some were regulars, chatting quietly over their meals, while others were new visitors drawn by the restaurant's reputation. The young waitress moved from table to table with her usual care and attention. Every smile, every polite exchange, every perfectly timed service was a reflection of the lessons she had learned, not just in training, but in life. She thought about the couple again. The man had left the previous night with a newfound respect, while the girlfriend had walked away humbled, though not fully aware of the lessons she had been taught. The young waitress realized that her role in that moment had gone beyond serving food. She had been a teacher without intending to be, showing through her actions that arrogance and entitlement could never outshine patience, dignity, and character. Later that day, the man returned, this time alone. He approached her quietly, as if he had rehearsed what he wanted to say. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, "not just for the service, but for the example you set. I've been thinking a lot about last night, and it made me realize how much I've underestimated people based on appearances." She smiled politely. "I appreciate that. But really, I was just doing my job." "No," he said firmly. "It was more than that. You handled a difficult situation with calm and grace. Most people would have lost their temper or become defensive. You didn't. That's remarkable." The young waitress felt a small warmth in her chest. It wasn't about flattery. It was about recognition of effort and character. She had worked hard, faced challenges, and maintained her dignity, and someone had noticed it in a meaningful way. Their conversation was brief, but it left an impact. The man left, clearly thoughtful, and the young waitress returned to her work, carrying a quiet sense of fulfillment. She knew that life would continue to test her, but she also knew that she had the inner strength to face whatever came her way. Later that evening, the restaurant closed, and the staff gathered for a brief meeting. The manager spoke to them with a mixture of pride and appreciation. "I want to thank everyone for their hard work, especially in challenging situations," he said. "But I want to highlight the example set by one person in particular. The way she handled the wealthy couple shows professionalism, patience, and character. These qualities are what make this place special, and they should inspire all of us." The young waitress felt a quiet smile spread across her face. She had never sought recognition, but she understood that her actions had a ripple effect. By maintaining her composure, she had not only upheld her own dignity, but had also set an example for others. As she walked home that night, the streets were calm and quiet. She reflected on the past few days, thinking about how much she had learned about people, about strength, and about respect. She realized that true power isn't shown through money, status, or insults. It's shown through how someone treats others, how they carry themselves under pressure, and how they maintain their dignity when faced with challenges. She thought about her family, her siblings, and the responsibilities she carried. Every decision, every action, every moment of patience and effort was a step toward a better life for them. The challenges she faced in the restaurant were small compared to the challenges life sometimes presented, but they taught her skills that would carry her far beyond the walls of any dining room. Her mind wandered briefly to the girlfriend, whose arrogance had been met with quiet strength. She realized that people like her were often caught off guard when someone refused to be intimidated. The lesson was subtle but important. Respect and humility are earned through actions, not assumed through wealth or appearance. The young waitress arrived at her small apartment, tired but fulfilled. She prepared a simple meal, thinking about the future and the steps she would take to reach her goals. She had dreams that extended far beyond the restaurant, dreams of growth, education, and a life where she could make a difference in the world. The lessons she had learned, the value of patience, dignity, and inner strength would guide her on that journey. The next few weeks were a continuation of the routine, but the young waitress noticed subtle changes in the restaurant. Regular customers spoke more warmly, staff members seemed more confident, and even the atmosphere felt more positive. The ripple effect of her actions continued quietly, shaping the environment in ways she hadn't anticipated. One day, the manager pulled her aside again. "I've received some feedback," he said, smiling. "People have noticed the way you handle difficult situations. You've made a real impact here." She shrugged modestly. "I'm just trying to do my best," she said. He nodded. "And that's exactly why it matters. Not everyone can stay calm under pressure, and not everyone can turn a challenging situation into an example of professionalism and dignity. You've done that consistently, and it's inspiring." Her co-workers nodded in agreement. They had watched her handle countless situations with patience and professionalism. But this recognition reinforced the idea that character was more powerful than any insult or challenge. Weeks later, the wealthy couple returned once more, this time with a different demeanor. The girlfriend, though still sharp, was more subdued, and the man seemed reflective. They approached the young waitress's station, and the man spoke first, "I want to apologize," he said. "Not just for last time, but for how we treated you. We misjudged you, and it was wrong. You've shown us patience, professionalism, and character that we didn't expect." The young waitress nodded politely. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that." The girlfriend looked at her, hesitating. She seemed unsure of what to say, as if her previous arrogance had been challenged in a way she hadn't anticipated. Finally, she muttered a quiet, I'm sorry as well." The young waitress accepted it with the same calm dignity she had shown throughout. She didn't need grand gestures or loud acknowledgments. The quiet recognition was enough. What mattered most was that respect had been restored, and that people had learned something important about humility and character. As the couple left, the young waitress returned to her station, feeling a sense of closure. She had faced insults, judgment, and arrogance, and she had emerged with her dignity intact. She had proven to herself, and to others, that patience, professionalism, and inner strength were more powerful than wealth or status. The restaurant continued its evening, filled with the usual chatter, laughter, and the clinking of dishes. But there was a subtle difference in the air. The lessons of the past days had left their mark on everyone's staff, customers, and even the couple who had initially caused tension. The young waitress moved through the restaurant with her usual focus. But there was a quiet confidence in her step. She had faced challenges, learned from them, and shown that true strength lies not in domination or arrogance, but in dignity, patience, and respect. As she finished her shift that night and walked home under the glow of streetlights, she felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. She thought about her family, her goals, and the path she was creating for herself. The experiences she had endured had shaped her, not by breaking her, but by strengthening her resolve. She understood now that life would continue to test her in ways both small and significant. There would be moments of challenge, of judgment, and of unfairness. But she also knew that her response, her patience, dignity, and professionalism would define her far more than any external obstacle. For the young waitress, the events of those nights were more than a story of insults and arrogance. They were a lesson in resilience, a demonstration of character, and a reminder that true strength is quiet, steady, and undeniable. It doesn't rely on wealth, status, or appearance. It relies on the choices we make, the way we treat others, and the dignity with which we carry ourselves. As she reached her apartment and looked out at the city lights, she felt a sense of hope. She knew that the future was uncertain, but she also knew that she had the tools to face it. Patience, respect, and inner strength were her allies, and she would carry them with her, no matter what came next. The young waitress closed the door behind her, feeling a sense of completion. The challenges, the lessons, the victories, both quiet and visible, had shaped her into someone who understood the true meaning of dignity and resilience. She had faced arrogance and judgment, and she had emerged not only unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever before. And in that quiet moment, she realized that she didn't need validation from anyone. She had earned it for herself, and that was the most powerful recognition of all.